The agenda, can I ask you to take your seats? We have Prime Minister Plenković with us. Dear colleagues, we have Prime Minister Andrej Plenković here in the chamber with us. Can I ask you to take your seats, please? Prime Minister, I would like to welcome you to this Parliament. I would like to welcome Prime Minister Andrej Plenković with us today. Prime Minister, welcome back to the European Parliament. A house that you know so well. We know you as a proud pro-European who, as a State Secretary for European Integration, laid the groundwork for Croatia's accession to the European Union in 2013. And as a member of the European Parliament, you worked closely with all of us and also our Ukrainian colleagues. And today, it is under your leadership as Prime Minister of Croatia that your country has successfully met all the legal criteria for entry into the euro area. Congratulations. At the start of the year, our House celebrated the Euro's 20th anniversary, and it is fitting, therefore, that Croatia will soon become the 20th member of the Eurozone. And this marks a true defining moment for Croatia and our Union. But in order to remain credible, we must also be consistent. Croatia is ready for Schengen. The European Parliament has long recognised that Croatia has met all the necessary requirements to join the Schengen area, and we will continue to support that. Croatia's European story is a success story. It gives hope. It shows results. With a war on our continent, with the decisions that we must take this week, the importance of hope cannot be underestimated, but hope alone will only get us so far. When countries look to Europe, they expect us to keep our promises and they expect tangible progress, because Europe can be more. And on that note, I thank you, Prime Minister. Dear Andrej, thank you for being a staunch supporter of Europe, for your leadership and for your tireless endeavours to maintain a viable EU perspective for the region. Prime Minister Andrej, the floor is yours.
Honourable President of the European Parliament, dear Roberta, Honourable Vice Presidents, leaders of political groups, honourable members, I may even say dear friends and dear colleagues, Honourable Vice President of the European Commission, dear Dubravka, dear Maros, dear citizens of Croatia, dear citizens of the European Union's member states. It is my great pleasure to speak in front of you here in the European Parliament already for the third time during my 6 years as the Prime Minister of Croatia. But also it is my pleasure to be here with you as a friend, as a former colleague that was here between 2013 and 2016. And also I would like to remember my friend David Sassoli, who was a President of the European Parliament and who unfortunately left us too early almost half a year ago. This was a great loss for his family, but also to his home country, Italy, and to the entire European Union. Dear friends, when I was speaking last time here in this House of European Democracy, I presented at the time, it was January 2020, the program of the first ever Croatia's presidency of the Council of the European Union. The title of this program was A Strong Europe in the World of Challenges. What unfolded literally 2 weeks after that speech was the breakout of a COVID-19 pandemic, an event that has entirely altered the way of our lives, the way of our work, of our business, of our transport, of our education. It has literally altered the decision-making process the way we used to know it in the European Union. Croatia's presidency couldn't have guessed better that the world was really facing a challenge. And the challenge was the biggest pandemic in 100 years. The challenge that made us be creative, the challenge that has demonstrated more togetherness among the EU member states, the challenge that has shown the unprecedented solidarity, and the incredible swiftness and efficiency in our common actions to protect our citizens from this plague that has hit the world and that has hit the European Union, that has threatened the lives of our citizens. And in that respect, I think we can now, looking back at what was done in such a short period of time, not only with epidemiological measures, with the provision of protective equipment, with the incredibly fast discovery of the vaccines, we can say that we saved jobs, that we have kept the existential needs of our families, that we have managed to help our companies, our businesses, especially in the private sector, to bridge the threats that they were facing. In that respect, I, as a Prime Minister, was conducted by the concept of our policy, which we call the modern approach, the modern take on sovereignty. What it means to a country which became internationally recognized only 30 years ago is important to understand. We were a nation that was seeking its independence, that was seeking its state for many centuries. We finally attained this strategic national objective only 30 years ago in the context of tectonic global changes and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the entire fall of the communist regimes in the Eastern Europe. And for us, attaining our sovereignty was very important. Having our own state was very important. But we have very quickly decided that the future of our nation belongs to the European Union. And everything we have done for 2 decades after we became internationally recognized, and the day of our international recognition is the 15th of January, we strived to become a member of the European family. And we managed that in 2013. And when I say today to my fellow Croats, modern take on sovereignism, that means that we are achieving our national goals by pooling and sharing our sovereignty with our friends and partners in the European Union, that we are helping our citizens with the extension of the Christian principle of solidarity, something that brings us together, something that helps us to overcome all the difficulties and problems that we would have otherwise overcome in a far more complicated and difficult and most likely slower manner. That's why this approach that we have for our own country, we are systematically advocating for the entire future of our European Union. Because this debate comes in the context of the series of debates on This is Europe. And I will say a few words about the biggest challenge, the challenge that has started on the 24th of February this year, The brutal Russian invasion and aggression against Ukraine has literally annihilated the main principles of international law, the main approach to the global governance, to the international relations that we were cultivating for decades. A United Nations member country, sovereign country, neighboring country has suffered a brutal aggression. For Croatia, who was also a victim of aggression of, at the time, Greater Serbian policy by Milosevic regime at the beginning of the 90s, it was very quick, spontaneous, almost a reflex reaction of, first of all, understanding what was going on in Ukraine, and second, in extending our support and help. The policy of Moscow has two elements. It has two sticks. One stick is the nuclear arsenal, the other stick are the fossil fuels. With these two sticks, they were able to conduct such an aggression against Ukraine. At the same time, the two narratives, the narrative of literally not recognizing the Ukrainian identity. If you say that you are not Ukrainians, but you are small Russians, then you go into the essence of the identity of a nation. And second, the almost incredible narrative of denazification of Ukraine was, in our view, quickly translated into similar type of narratives that we had in 1990 vis-à-vis the Croats. Almost the same when it comes to the identity and when it comes to the so-called denazification. And these parallels were very clear to us. In my speech at the European Council on the 24th of February, I said that this has happened in the moment where obviously the analysis in Moscow was that there were some weaknesses in the context of the timing of the state of play of the West, I will put it in general. The first one was the way of perception that the West left Afghanistan, perhaps not in the most dignified manner. The second was the fact that there was a change of era in political terms in Germany. Second was that France was preoccupied with presidency of the Council and the presidential, and then, of course, which we witnessed recently, parliamentary elections. Third, that the United Kingdom left out its own reasoning, the European family. All of this happened immediately, just as in 2008, when there were Olympic Games in Beijing. At the time, there were Summer Olympic Games, and there was an invasion of Georgia. Now it happened again after the Olympic Games, again in Beijing, Winter Olympic Games, it happened in Ukraine. What were the ramifications? Ramifications for Ukrainian nation are devastating. Tens of thousands of dead, civilians and soldiers, 13 million people displaced, 6 million refugees, incredible material destruction, and the occupation of territory. But what we have witnessed was the incredible mobilization of the international community and support for Ukraine. We did the same. We paid our contribution with a lot of heart, both in political, in diplomatic, in economic, in financial terms, in humanitarian terms, by hosting the refugees in our country. There are over 20,000 Ukrainians which found shelter in Croatia, and we are ready to receive them more. And of course, we helped them, just as many other members of the European Union, by providing them means to fight for their freedom, for their independence, for their lives, and that was the procurement of military aid. In that context, Ukraine applied for the membership in the European Union. I was one of the members of the European Council who was immediately very clear and articulate about supporting this candidacy, not only because I was the president of the delegation for relations with Ukraine when I was an MEP here, several years ago, but because I know how important this gesture in this context for Ukrainian leadership, but most of all for the Ukrainian nation and Ukrainian people is. And therefore, I'm pleased to see that the position of many member states is now being assembled around the wording that will most likely the historic European Council tomorrow and on Friday actually grant Ukraine the candidate status. I think this is important, it's courageous, and it is certainly deserved by a nation that is fighting for the European principles of freedom and of democracy. And therefore, our support to Ukraine will remain very clear and unwavered. Similarly, we support the candidate status for Moldova. We support the candidate status for Georgia with conditions. We feel that this great leap of putting all of those three countries into the context of those states at the European continent who do have a European perspective is an important political evolution on the architecture of our Europe and of our continent. So if this is debate on Europe, this is a big change on the way that we are looking at countries who are not yet members of the European Union. In this context, I will just say that the global perception of the current state of play of international relations is going to be focused on the rather simple notion, and that is not the cooperative way of conducting international relations, but more conflictual way of international relations, whereby we shall on one side have democracies and on the other side the authoritarian regimes. This is the gist of the historical moment that we are going through. And this is where the European Union, as one of those who are at the peak of the democratic standards globally, should have a leading role in explaining and doing the so-called political pedagogy wherever we can of what is actually at stake. The ramifications are hitting everyone now of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, in terms of energy crisis, in terms of spike of the prices of the raw materials, construction materials, food, even risking famine, especially in the eastern part of Africa, but elsewhere globally too, and putting inflationary pressures on our own member states. This is important to understand. No one is untouched by the magnitude of this, first of all, energy crisis, but even more deeper by the rise of the prices of food. And here, just as we did in COVID, where we had a huge unexpected problem, but we provided a very big and efficient answer, and the answer was powerful. The EU Next Generation was a bold European answer of the European Union of today to the problem that was hitting every single of our citizens. And therefore, the attempt which we are now doing with the initiative after debates at the European Council, the Commission has come up with a Repower EU, was an important gesture and the guidance of the Commission how we can organize ourselves by being true to the commitment which we said in Versailles, we shall gradually abandon the fossil fuels coming from Russia. In order to be able to do that and still being able to organize secure supply of energy to our economies and to our households, we need to organize ourselves in terms of energy grids in the European Union. And that means investments, both in gas pipelines, in oil pipelines, in liquefied natural gas terminals. Croatia did its part of the homework already before. We have one LNG terminal at the island of Krk with a capacity of 2.9 billion cubic meters now. We decided to invest in it, to upgrade it to 6.1 billion cubic meters, which would be enough not only for our needs in terms of our economy and our citizens and our industry, of course, but also to the needs of our neighboring states such as Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina or Hungary. Similarly, we use in the same way the Croatian Adriatic pipeline, which can provide enough oil for Hungary, for Slovakia, for Serbia, a pipeline that can easily provide enough for all the refineries in our neighborhood. That means that our geostrategic position as one of the energy hubs at the energy map of Europe is something we shall try to foster and strengthen in the years which are ahead of us. Talking about the debate on This is Europe and our debate at the European Council tomorrow and on Friday, and especially the summit that is organized tomorrow morning with the Western Balkans, I will mention here again the countries that are close to us, which we know well, where we are supporting their path towards the European Union, their European perspective, especially Bosnia and Herzegovina, with whom we share more than 1,000 kilometers of border, where Croats, people who are the same as Croats in Croatia, are one of the three constituent peoples of Bosnia and Herzegovina, with which we have tremendous economic exchange. We are the second investor in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and there are so many linkages, historic, cultural, economic, transport that bind us together. And we, of course, have been in favor of granting a candidate status also to Bosnia and Herzegovina, very clearly, because we feel that this country should not be the last wagon in the train of the Western Balkans towards the European Union. It would be a historical injustice. And therefore we are one of those member states who are advocating granting a candidate status also to Bosnia and Herzegovina, in which context we would like also the urgent solution for the changes to the electoral law, which would enable that we have fair and just elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where all the three constituent peoples, and especially Croats, are after the elections represented as duly as they should be, as it was the letter and the spirit of the Dayton-Paris Agreement, whose Annex 4 is the constitution of the country. And this position is very clear. It's a friendly position, it's a good neighborly position, it's a position that will help the European future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Croatia will be the one who will be the first one to support it wholeheartedly and continuously. When it comes to the future of Europe and the debate after the Convention on the Future of Europe and the Conference on the Future of Europe, I would here like to thank Dubravka Šuica, who is a Croatian member of the European Commission and the Vice President for Demography and Democracy. And I think that she has done a great job, that the European Parliament has done a great job, that national parliaments have participated in this all-encompassing and inclusive process in bringing the European citizens more closer to the European institutions, but more essentially to the gist of the debate of what we can do better together and how we can fill perhaps those voids in our cooperation, or how we can rectify some elements that should be done better. From that respect, I think that the Conference on the Future of Europe, especially its conclusions with the suggestions and recommendations, are a very clear signal of the European peoples, of European citizens from all of our member states. In Croatia we had more than 250 events on what the European institutions should do. What would be our direction? I was in particular pleased that there was a very, very clear signal that we should do more in terms of mixed shared competencies when it comes to health cooperation. If there was one lesson learned from the pandemic, and we were in the driving seat, we had the presidency, our ambassador here, our permanent representative, triggered the mechanisms at the beginning, already at the end of January in 2020, and then we realized that actually this was an area where the European Union member states should have more structured cooperation, more shared competencies, more competencies for the Commission to lead the processes which were done in the crisis management in such an efficient way as if everything was planned. And it wasn't. So I think that this message that came from the recommendations should certainly be taken into account. When it comes to this critical debate on the decision-making process, when it comes to the issues of foreign and security policy, I understand and fully can have a good comprehension of what the position of the European Parliament is, and I read the resolution. Here, when you sit in the position of a member of the European Parliament, and I'm lucky to have this experience, and when you sit in your position as the head of government, the optic is a little bit different. There are perhaps 97, 98, 99% of the situations where we find a compromise and agreement almost on everything. Occasionally there are situations where we differ, and we have sometimes difficulties in finding the understanding of other partners for the particular position we have. I'm always saying that conditioning or blackmailing is a very bad policy. We were a victim of blackmailing for several years before we became member, and we don't like it and we don't support it. And we always advocate how to use the right argument with the right approach to our friends, to our partners. We are all part of the same family, how we can reach a compromise. And I have noted that many of the member states who belong to, let's say, small and medium-sized member states are a little bit reticent. They are reticent because they know what the mathematics and calculation of the voting in the Council means. And therefore, I think that this issue merits a very careful and a diligent follow-up. And we shall enter into this debate. We shall take duly into account the messages that were clearly sent to us by the European Conference and by the resolution of the European Parliament. May I say a few words about the Croatia's ambitions in this almost exactly ninth year of our membership, end of ninth year of our membership, because I think it's important to mention it as well. I conduct as a Prime Minister a very pro-European policy, taking into account the national interest of my country, just as everybody else is doing and should do. And we decided in our program 6 years ago that we want to be part of two deeper integrations. Two deeper integrations, first one, the Eurozone, and second, the Schengen area. And I was very pleased that Roberta has mentioned that the Croatia's membership of the Eurozone seems to be set. Your colleague Zigfrid Muresan, who I would like to thank, is a rapporteur for the Croatian membership in the Eurozone, has, after the visit to Croatia, made a very sober, correct, but also positively toned report that the relevant European Parliament committee has overwhelmingly supported, and I'm sure the same happens in the plenary. And that gesture of the European Parliament is highly appreciated in Croatia by my government, by our citizens, and that means that after the endorsement tomorrow at the European Council, we are facing the final decision at the ECOFIN Council on the 12th of July. That means that Croatia will join the Eurozone on the 1st of January 2023, just as we planned and just as we have carefully and diligently implemented our strategy for joining the euro, the program for the conversion of the Croatian kuna to euro, the action plan that followed after our joining of the exchange rate mechanism 2 and the banking union on the 10th of July 2020, 5 days after the second victory at the parliamentary elections that we had, and that we shall fulfill this key political, first of all, but also economic and financial objective on time and as we planned. And I thank you for your support and your understanding that Croatia becomes the 20th member of the Eurozone. At the same time, I think already next week the Council will send the formal proposal for the decision to be taken on the Croatia's membership in the Schengen area, also to the European Parliament, where I expect we will quickly have a rapporteur for Schengen, who will also take a very diligent view on our readiness, and we have also worked very, very hard to fulfill this criteria, where both Juncker's Commission at the end of their mandate in October 2019, and then again Commission of Ursula von der Leyen, and I would like to thank in particular her and Commissioner Ylva Johansson, have estimated that Croatia has fulfilled the necessary criteria, and that the relevant decision of the Council after the opinion of the European Parliament will be taken in autumn, and that we shall also join this deeper integration on the 1st of January 2023. That would mean that Croatia will be with both feet firmly in the center of the European Union, firmly in the deeper integration, thus fulfilling the decision of the Croatian Parliament and of the Croatian people at the referendum where we joined the European Union. In that respect, we shall strengthen our economy, we shall strengthen the free movement, we shall facilitate the free movement of people, and it will be a backup to a situation which we have today. We have the lowest number of unemployed people in Croatia in last perhaps 30 years, only 103,000. We have the biggest employment in Croatia in last 20 years, and we shall try to continue intervening, as I said many times, whether it was COVID or now the energy crisis, to keep the economic and social standard of our citizens, because this is clearly a key priority which we will make sure happens because of synergy of using the European and Croatian sources. The membership of the European Union has proved itself in time of crisis as one of those essential tools how we can fulfill the key national objectives and provide shelter and security for our citizens. In that respect, I will mention one important project, also co-financed by the European Union budget means, and that is the Pelješac Bridge, the bridge that will be opened on the 26th of July this year, that will physically connect the southern part of Croatia with the rest of the country. For us, it is a strategic objective that couldn't have had more symbolic connotation that it has, and that we shall be continuing to invest in the new security threats, into our defense capabilities, and into contribution of Croatia to the strategic autonomy of the European Union. Croatia will procure 12 French Rafale multi-combat planes that will arrive in a little bit more than a year time from today, and that will strengthen our role as a partner in the European Union's defense, but also as a reliable ally in NATO. All of this brings me to conclusion that the times are full of challenges, just as much as we thought when we were preparing our presidency program 2.5 years ago, but even more when I look at the health crisis, security crisis, political crisis, but also energy and existential crisis for many of our citizens who, without the role of the state, and moreover, without the concerted action, joint action, action through the principle of solidarity of the European Union, would not look for a better future as we can look at it today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister Plenković. And now we have one round of representatives of the political groups, starting with the chair of the EPP group, Manfred Weber.
President Metsola, Vice President Suica and Šefčovič, dear Prime Minister, dear Andrej, welcome back in the European Parliament as former colleagues. And it's great to have you here. As a second term now as Prime Minister, with a strong mandate from your citizens, you are leading Croatia and you are also leading the European debate. And when I have in mind that Croatia is the youngest member inside of the European Union today, it's impressive to see the European success story behind. When I look for these arguments for this success story, then first comes to my mind the dramatically reduced youth unemployment, to give young generation a perspective, to reduce the demographic brain drain, all these negative developments over the last decades. And you mentioned already, and also Roberta mentioned already, two other success stories, with now joining the Eurozone, a big success. And I want to underline it's not only for Croatia, it's also for Europe, for the Eurozone, a big success, because it's a proof that this makes sense to do it together. It strengthens the authority of the Euro in the world. And also now the Schengen enlargement. You have the full support of your political group, and I think also from the European Parliament, because you managed to do the necessary steps. When we talk about the future of Europe, Croatia is there in a leading role. I also want to thank Dubravka for her service, for her work on the conference for the future of Europe. And you also referred to the history of Croatia. And whenever I speak about the general approach Croatians towards the Euro, one event comes to my mind when I was the first time as a young MEP in Dubrovnik, in the city of Dubravka. And we visited there the memorial center, showing the pictures of the soldiers died fighting, defending freedom, the country, but also freedom and democracy and rule of law. And I saw the pictures, I saw then the subtitle about the names and about the age of the people, of the soldiers died. And then I read 1971, 1972, and that is my birth year as well. I grew up in Bavaria in a peaceful time, and I always had and still have a lot of respect to those who fought for democracy in Croatia. Croatia is in a way a good proof for what we have to do today. You said it, because now it's a similar situation to Ukraine and Moldova, for those who now stand up and fight for our values, to give them a similar perspective, that enlargement works, that we should be convinced about this model and this approach. And this is also the same towards the Western Balkan, where we need now a clear timeline. I want to thank the opposition in Bulgaria today, because Boyko Borisov and Gerb voted in favor of Northern Macedonia, to give them a perspective. And I also want to express towards the Serbian friends that they have to decide whether they want to join the European Union or whether they are on the side of Russia. So there is no in between anymore. That we are making enlargement possible, we have to improve Europe. And there you mentioned one aspect when we speak about the unanimous vote, that there we have probably different point of views. Croatia is now joining the Eurozone. That means to give up sovereignty, because you have no national currency anymore. But the idea behind is to be stronger together when we vote by majority. And the same is for foreign affairs. We have no China policy currently as European Union. That gives us a clear proof that we are not capable to answer the big challenges due to the decision-making mechanism. So that's why you can imagine we would be happy if you also would show up in the Council to present the idea of a convention, because we need a deepening of the European Union to make Europe better, stronger for the future. And Croatia will contribute to this. Thank you so much, dear Andrej, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. I give the floor next to Biljana Borzan on behalf of the S&D Group.
Poštovane kolegice I kolege, Dear colleagues, dear Prime Minister, in every crisis, the poorest and the most vulnerable suffer the most. And while some are thinking about how to put food on the table or how to pay their utility bills, others are getting rich. Energy dependence and disruptions of production have resulted in rising prices, but some prices have skyrocketed due to greed alone. Taxation of windfall profits, good control over prices, the fight against growing inequalities through redistribution of resources, and the creation of a fairer market should be the matter of a common interest. But this will not happen by itself. You, as the Prime Minister, and your colleagues have the responsibility to protect our citizens. I keep repeating that, but maybe you can hear it better here in Brussels. In the end, I want to say that joining the Eurozone is good. The Euro, however, is not a goal. It is just a means to enable our people to live better. Our European path goes further towards Schengen, but it stops at the Slovenian border. Like our citizens, I hope that we will achieve this goal as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Borzan. And now on behalf of the Renew Group, I invite Clement Groschel to take the floor.
Hvala, predsednica. Spoštovani predsednik vlade.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Prime Minister. On behalf of Renew Europe, I'd also like to wish you a warm welcome and ask a few questions of you. We're pleased to see that Croatia will be joining the Eurozone. That's an opportunity for Croatia and for the European Union. But what will the Croatian government be doing to ensure that in this time of great tensions, that the euro introduction won't be abused for unjustified price increases? Our group, of course, supports the aid to earthquake areas, and we support efficient work from the state authorities. But we also expect Croatia to do everything possible to ensure that European funds are not abused, which has been a problem in the past. Also, when it comes to the rule of law, that's a fundamental issue for the survival of the European Union. So I hope that decisions of courts will actually be respected and implemented even when the political class does not agree with them. Then I'd like to ask you about the Migration Pact. There have been reports of pushbacks and deaths at the border. So do these actions fulfill the standards of European law and the standards of the European Council? Schengen functions not only because there is a freedom of movement, but it also is an area of common values and standards. So we also have to remember the relationship between Croatia and Bosnia. There's an issue with nationalism here. There are nationalists who want to close the door to EU membership for Bosnia. Isn't it rather a paradox? Can we solve this if we allow Bosnia to a clear route to full membership of the EU? Surely that is in the interest not only of the EU, but also in the interest of Bosnia-Herzegovina and the Croatian people. I hope that Croatia is successful in the tourist season, and I hope that we won't have too many traffic jams on the journey there.
Lamberts.
Prime Minister, on behalf of the Greens, welcome to the European Parliament. Last Sunday, I was debating with Pierre Polstoy, Vice President of the Russian Parliament. He said that he wasn't really interested in when Ukraine becoming candidate to the EU. He said it was not a problem because the Ukraine won't exist soon. He called for a new fight in Russia. You denounced this. He said the reaffirmation of the Brezhnev doctrine that of limited sovereignty, saying that means by certain countries that can be sovereign and others have to follow the will of these major powers. That's what we call imperialism. Nothing could be further from the concept than the idea that you have just highlighted of shared sovereignty. Sovereignty which is freely shared, and I was moved to see after the dismembering of former Yugoslavia and say that you said quite clearly that Croatia has chosen its European vocation, chosen to renounce, or perhaps not to renounce, but to share its sovereignty with 30 other countries here in Europe. The fact that we can see Croatia joining the Eurozone and Schengen, and something I'm very pleased about. I was pleased when you became a member of the EU, and I'm still convinced today the fact that the EU is the governance system for the future. I wanted to say perhaps it's friends who need to share their concerns. Two questions I had in relation to what is going on in your country. I'd like to see all member states to be exemplary in all points, but there are 2 points I wanted to mention. Firstly, the manner in which European funds are allocated in your country. It falls to me to say that too often European money is often shared on the first come first serve rather than the merit of projects or the value of the European budget. The value of European projects is that we need to be capable of doing two things together, that things we can't do on our own. Now, under these projects, you won't be surprised that as a Green, I talk about the challenge of climate change. Obviously, Croatia is affected by climate change, but also you have a huge potential in relation to renewable energy. So therefore, I really would like Croatia to be a pioneer of this transition. Now, second concern I have, you spoke about accession to the Schengen area. You know, when we came to Zagreb for the opening of the Croatian presidency, we said that we continue to receive messages saying that there are pushbacks at the borders of the country. At the time, you promised us that that would be investigated, and if anything illegal was happening, they would be dealt with. But we continue to read the messages about this situation. Yes, Croatia should be in Schengen, but not at the price of being at the forefront of Fortress Europe. Now, on a personal note, for over 30 years, I have a member of my family who is Belgian and Croatian. Now, his father came here in the 1960s and he worked in construction, but he also always loved literature. Now, they said that the reality of Yugoslavia in the 20th century was important, and it's a visceral connection to his country and also to family values. Now, I know that he holds you in high esteem, so he would be proud of the fact that you would receive this work from him.
Thank you, Mr. Lamberts. I give the floor next on behalf of the ID group to Gunnar Beck.
Many thanks, Madam President. I'm not going to speak for 2 or 2.5 additional minutes, maybe a few seconds more, and I'm counting on your indulgence. Thank you. Mr Plenković, mein Glückwunsch zu...
Minister, congratulations on joining the euro. However, the eurozone has seen close to zero, if not negative growth in industries, hopelessly beaten, crushed by the USA and China, inflation driven, and in Switzerland it's under 3%. The German saver alone spent in 221 got 160 billion in losses. unaffordable. The popular economies are suffering disastrously, and the saving of the euro has been dragging on for years, hoping to find a contradiction to Article 100 of the TFEU, 175 and 310 and 311 of the TFEU. It's a well-known phenomenon, and your Thomas Moros, also from your country, said that we can only crumble on the words individual power tried to cling to it by giving up. But you give up your country, you sacrifice it for the euro. Actually, countries that actually had given up on their sovereignty long ago. I hope that won't happen to your country.
Seconds. Thank you, Mr. Beck. I give the floor on behalf of the ECR to Eugen Jurica now.
Thank you for the floor. Budem hovoriť po slovensky. Chorvátsko sa budúci rok stane...
I'll be speaking Slovak. Thank you. Croatia will become the 20th member of the Eurozone next year. And on this opportunity, I would like to congratulate Croatia, but also say a few words about the Eurozone. The whole idea of the Eurozone was to be a group of countries with low public debt and healthy public finances, and they would have a common currency. From the beginning of the financial crisis, everything was transformed. The ECB has been buying sovereign debt and has made the union into a transfer union. Since the start of the pandemic, the rules have been forgotten about entirely. Debt has been reaching ever higher levels, and so is inflation. Researchers are saying that countries with their own currency have got more solid growth. Nevertheless, I wish Croatia the best of luck in joining the euro.
Cornelia Ernst.
Thanks a lot, Herr Ministerpräsident.
Prime Minister, let's talk about Europe. There are a number of things that need to change. We know we're talking about we need to take on the challenges, and that includes all countries of the former Yugoslavia, need to look at each other eye to eye as equals with the EU. It's high time that we start doing that. An EU that not only presumably decides on who wins and who loses, but speaks out more for the average citizens. And in the EU, as you pointed out, fights poverty. We're talking about food prices, energy prices, and many other things. To do that, a contribution, a serious contribution needs to be made. Nothing happens without freedom and democracy in Europe. Nothing at all. It starts by saying to all member states, including yours and mine, to be frank, you give women the right to dispose of their own bodies and in no way accepting or even sabotaging their efforts. It's something that still hasn't been achieved and is in jeopardy. And people at the foreign borders have to be respected. I've often been to your country, really quite often, and it is unbearable to see how you deal with refugees. I can't bear to watch it. The pushback due to the crisis, time and time again. And how does that square with your positive, rose-tinted look on life? It's rather different. It doesn't add up. Now, of course, at the Croatian border, for years, you fought against the Taliban. Explain to me what the EU can do, and what about the Afghan refugees fleeing their country? We need to put a stop to this, just putting people away into little compartmental drawers. Of course, we have a black book on pushbacks of countries. It's not just Croatia. There are many countries in Europe who do the same. So let's raise this issue, speak out, and make real change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ernst. Next is Ivan Sinčić.
Hvala vam, predsjedavajuća.
Thank you, Mrs. President. Distinguished Mr. President, recession in Croatia has reached the highest level. This is okay. This is the policy that you are pursuing with your party, which has been sentenced before the court. Most of the parties in the Croatian parliament have voted for the sanctions in Russia. So you had support of your party and the opposition parties in the Croatian parliament. We cannot blame you for the recession. Out of 195 countries in the world, only 45 have introduced sanctions against Russia, and all of them have consequences. However, my interest is long-term policy, not just short-term policy. I investigate corruption, I listen to the citizens, I report crimes, and I am building a network where your corrupted associates are being prosecuted one after the other. Maybe you don't have all the information by the Croatian citizens, maybe you don't have the full truth, but just the truth that you want to present. Bulgarian Prime Minister had support by the media, and the proceedings against him have lasted for 13 years. Brussels backed him up, but finally he fell because the citizens of Bulgaria stopped this. Why does the EU tolerate so much corruption in Bulgaria? I have been to Bulgaria. I've given my contribution to the fight against crime there, and now this Prime Minister is not in power and is in prison. Mr. Plenković, you should ask yourself who will be the last to laugh in this situation.
I'll give you the floor to respond to the questions, the comments, the gifts, the attributions, the books that you have received.
Thank you very much, Madam President. How much time do I have? 5 minutes. Oh, okay. I will try to be then very precise.
2.5, so it will be fine.
Thank you very much to President of the European People's Party and the EPP group in the Parliament, Manfred Weber, for the positive comments about Croatia's advancement and especially the fulfillment of the criteria for joining the Eurozone. When it comes to the follow-up on the conference on the future of Europe, we shall certainly debate it within the Council. As I told you, having been in the European Parliament, I can completely understand the position of the European Parliament, and I will certainly give a constructive contribution of Croatia to what we can do to improve our decision making. And as I said, in terms of foreign policy, we basically agree on 97, 98, perhaps 99% of issues, and there are a small margin of those dossiers where we need more consultation and perhaps more time to forge a compromise. To Madame Borzan on energy, it's good that you mentioned it. Now I can repeat that we have provided a 5 billion kunas package to subsidize our households, to subsidize our micro, small and medium-sized businesses, to subsidize our farmers, to subsidize our fishermen, to subsidize our pensioners, to lower the VAT from 25 to 5%, from 13 to 5 for all those products which are mostly used by our citizens, and thus mitigate the effects of the spike of the prices, and we shall continue to do that again. And not only the government, the state inspectorate, but also the watchdogs in terms of consumer protection should play their role and strongly blacklist those who are trying to profit in this crisis and unduly and unjustifiably raise the prices of their products. When it comes to Mr. Groschel, thank you for the support for the euro. When it comes to the EU funds and to the aid of the European Union through the EU Solidarity Fund for earthquake, I'm grateful here for the Commission, who has helped us to not only receive for 2 terrible earthquakes earthquakes in Zagreb and Banovina region, almost 1 billion euros. We are streamlining the efforts of all the ministries in order to speed up the process of reconstruction. And also the general comment on the use of funds. We are using them in the best practices that exist in the European Union with all the scrutiny and the controls that is required. On the rule of law and pacta sunt servanda, in generally, yes, absolutely, but at the same time, you are aware, coming from Slovenia, that the unfortunate arbitration process on the border dispute fell and was inevitably and irretrievably lost and denounced by the Croatian Parliament because of fraudulent activities that were happening between the Slovenian agent and the Slovenian member of the arbitration council. So we want to solve the bilateral border issue, but not on the basis of the process which could not have been cleansed as if it was a mistake of a first grader at school by making a typing error on the alphabet. When it comes to the migration pact, we of course support it. It is part of our approach to Schengen. Schengen needs to be renovated, upgraded and updated, but Croatia should be within Schengen. When it comes to your comment on Bosnia and Herzegovina national politics, nationalistic politics, please bear in mind Bosnia and Herzegovina applied for membership in the European Union in February of 2016 when Dragan Čović, the leader of, perhaps in your eyes, a nationalist party, which is Croatian Democratic Union of Bosnia and Herzegovina, our sister party, was chairman of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. This démarche of filing an application was more supported by the members of this House, Croatian members of the European Parliament, both from HDZ but also from Social Democrats and some other friends, such as at the time Romanian rapporteur Preda, than many member states of the European Union. And we were the first one to support the European Union membership path of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We shall continue to do so and continue to extend the knowledge and understanding of the country that is based on the concept of one state, two entities and three constituent peoples which should be equal. None of the constituent equals, in this case Croats, at the territory of federation should not be treated as not equal. This is the only basic, simple, normal, decent demand, and we will stick to it. The other issue that Mr. Lamberts mentioned, when it comes to the choice of Croatia for being part of the European Union, I think we had this debate when you visited Croatia 2.5 years ago. I really enjoyed it, and I think you understood that we are doing this of our own choice and of our own free will. We shall continue to that. Pooling and sharing of sovereignty is something we support. We think we are stronger in the European Union than we would have been if we were not. And therefore the full understanding of the concept of the European integration is something that we fully support. On Schengen, and the fact that Croatian police, more than 6,000 members of the Croatian police, is protecting the Croatia's external border, is a job which is very difficult to do, a job where they have the total scrutiny of the entire Ministry of Interior. Every single complaint is being checked and verified. We have established an entirely independent monitoring mechanism out of our own will, in cooperation with the European Commission. I think that the report of the independent monitoring mechanism will be out sometime next week. We will be in the process of scrutiny in the European Parliament when the opinion on Croatia's membership of Schengen will be done, open to explain and to provide arguments on any potential allegation if there are some, and we shall provide answers. But generally the Schengen acquis, we are ready, the legal standards, we are ready, the protection of border, we are completely ready. Plus we are the country that never made a political decision to elevate neither walls, no fences, no barbed wires, no with Serbia, no with Bosnia and Herzegovina, no with Montenegro. These are friends, neighbors with whom we should not have physical barriers. And this is something that we can only protect by the presence of Croatian police at more than 1,300 kilometers of our external border. To Mr. Beck and to Mr. Jurica, 2 points. Croatia is a highly eurized economy. Our savings, our loans are basically more than 50-60% in euros. 70% of tourists that visit Croatia come from Eurozone. Our trade is with the Eurozone. This was the logical choice, logical follow-up of our accession treaty. We are basically abrogating the derogation. And this is the work that has been done diligently, fulfilling all the criteria with the action plan, and clear opinions of the Commission and of the ECB actually give us argument to continue to do that. For our economy, euro will bring benefits and it will not be a negative circumstance. When it comes to Schengen, I think I have to Madame Ernst answered. I will look at what you have given me. When it comes to Mr. Sinčić, I think that it's no surprise to the Croatian public that you come here and advocate basically the Russian position. This is very clear. You belong to one of those political actors who is strongly supported by the Russian actors. You did this in the Croatian parliament. You are doing this now in the European Parliament. It's your right, but also your responsibility. When it comes to the fight against corruption, I said at the beginning of my mandate 6 years ago, no one is immune to the independent work of our judicial institutions, our state prosecutor, our special prosecutor for corruption and organized crime, our police. They do their work independently. Those who will in the legal process be declared as responsible for something, they will be condemned, or if they are not, they will be free, just as in any other country in Europe. Corruption is a negative phenomena, but is not a phenomena that is only applicable to Croatia. It is unfortunately a phenomena that exists for many years. And we are fighting it strongly with the means, with the changing of the laws, with the action plans, and with concrete cases. And those who know Croatia better certainly know that there is no whatsoever government's influence on the work of the prosecutor or of our judiciary or the police, and it will remain in such a manner. Because at the end of the day, when we joined the European Union in 2013, and you of course didn't contribute 1 millimeter for Croatia becoming a member of the European Union, I did, members of my party did, unlike you and perhaps yours. So this is a huge difference between the two of us. We have been Europeans from the first day. You have joined the train and you are enjoying the benefits of being an MEP, even though you obviously do not believe neither in the European Union and haven't contributed to Croatia's European journey at all. But that is democracy. I respect it, and I was very happy to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. This debate is now closed, and we will move on to the next debate with my colleague Rainer Wieland.